Babysitters are supposed to be symbols of trust. Parents leave them in charge of their most precious gift, children, believing they'll nurture, protect, and keep them safe. But what happens when the babysitter is the threat? In countless neighborhoods, families hand over their house keys and bedtime routines to teenagers eager to make a few dollars. They're often the good kids next door, classmates from school, or even relatives. Nobody ever suspects that behind that smile, behind the homework and the after-school activities, something darker might be brewing. The myth of safety. For generations, babysitting has been seen as a wholesome rite of passage, a way for teens to prove responsibility, a bridge to adulthood. Parents hire them because they're familiar faces, people who blend into the neighborhood, who know the rules of the house, who can be trusted. But history has shown that even in these seemingly safe scenarios, tragedy can unfold. When violence comes from someone so young, someone so trusted, it doesn't just break hearts. It shatters the very foundation of community safety. The first cracks in the mask. Before the crimes come to light, there are often subtle warning signs. Cruelty to pets, aggression toward siblings, obsession with violent media, or strange outbursts that adults dismiss as just teenage mood swings. For some babysitters, the position of authority over younger children becomes intoxicating. It gives them control, and for those with darker impulses, it becomes an opportunity. And when that trust is betrayed, the aftermath is catastrophic. Case study teaser: when the babysitter becomes the monster. In the chapters ahead, we'll uncover real cases where babysitters, some as young as 12 or 13, committed acts of unthinkable violence. Stories where parents returned home expecting to find their children tucked safely in bed, only to discover horror waiting for them. Some of these babysitters confessed. Others denied everything until the evidence was overwhelming. A few even manipulated entire communities into believing they were innocent, hiding in plain sight. Why these stories haunt us? These cases grip us not only because of the violence, but because they challenge one of our deepest beliefs: that children and teens are innocent by default. When a young babysitter kills, it's not just murder, it's betrayal. It's the destruction of trust in someone we allowed into our homes, into our families. This is why these stories linger. They're not just about crime. They're about the dark truth that danger can come from the very people we think we know best. It was supposed to be a quiet night, a couple heading out for dinner, a teenage girl earning a little extra cash, and two children expected to be asleep before their parents returned. But by the time dawn broke, a community's sense of safety was gone forever. The babysitter, seemingly perfect. She was young, polite, and well-liked. Neighbors described her as dependable. Parents who had hired her before said they never worried when she was in charge. On the surface, she was the kind of babysitter anyone would trust. But behind that carefully crafted image, cracks were forming. She was struggling with feelings she didn't know how to handle: anger, jealousy, and a need for control. In her teenage world, where emotions burn hot and logic often takes a back seat, those cracks widened into something much darker. The children, the kids she was hired to watch, adored her. To them, she was more like an older sister than a babysitter. She played games, told stories, and knew how to win their trust. But that bond would be the very thing that made the betrayal so shocking. No one imagined the children's safety would be at risk, not from the person who was supposed to keep them safe. The night of the crime, as the evening unfolded, the babysitter seemed normal. Dinner was served, bedtime routines followed, and the children settled into their rooms. But something changed after the lights went out. Whether it was a sudden burst of rage, a calculated plan she had been hiding, or a chilling combination of both, the babysitter turned from protector to predator. By the time the parents returned, their worst nightmare awaited them. Their children lifeless, their home a crime scene, and the babysitter? She tried to act shocked, even innocent, as if she had stumbled onto the horror just as they did. The investigation. At first, police didn't want to believe someone so young could be responsible. The babysitter wept, claimed she had no idea what happened, and pointed the finger at a phantom intruder. But investigators quickly noticed inconsistencies. No signs of forced entry, The timeline didn't match her story. Forensic evidence pointed inward, not outward. When questioned more closely, her calm facade cracked. She shifted from tears to anger, from confusion to eerie calmness. Detectives realized they weren't dealing with an innocent teen caught in tragedy. They were dealing with a killer. The courtroom shock. The trial drew national attention. How could someone so young, so trusted, commit such an act? The defense painted her as a child herself, too immature to understand the gravity of her actions. The prosecution, however, showed the cold, calculated steps she took before and after the crime. The jury was left to decide. Was she a child who lost control, or a monster hiding behind a babysitter's smile? Why this case still haunts. This story still terrifies parents today because it dismantles the illusion of safety. The idea that a babysitter, a figure meant to protect, could kill shatters the boundary between trust and danger. And perhaps most disturbing of all, this was not an isolated case. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell. Some crimes happen in the heat of the moment, but others are chillingly deliberate. In this case, the babysitter didn't just snap. She planned every step. What unfolded was less about teenage immaturity and more about cold-blooded intent. The babysitter's secret life. By day, she looked like any other teenager. She went to school, gossiped with friends, and pretended to be the girl next door. But behind closed doors, she nursed darker obsessions. Her journals revealed fantasies of control, violence, and power. She wasn't content with being the caregiver. She wanted to dominate, to test the limits of what she could get away with. Babysitting wasn't a job. It was her opportunity. The victim, the family, trusted her completely. They never imagined the girl sitting on their couch, eating popcorn and watching cartoons with their kids, could ever bring them harm. The child she targeted wasn't random. Investigators later found she had fixated on this specific victim, writing disturbing notes about how easy it would be to make it look like an accident. The crime unfolds. The night of the crime was chilling in its calculation. She prepared beforehand, locking doors, turning off lights, and isolating the child. What happened next was an act of violence that showed no hesitation, no remorse. When questioned later, she claimed it was an experiment. She wanted to know what it felt like to take a life. Those words alone horrified even the most seasoned detectives. The evidence that exposed her. For a while, she thought she had gotten away with it. She concocted stories of intruders, emergencies, and accidents. But her own obsession with keeping souvenirs betrayed her. Investigators found chilling notes, drawings, and even personal items she had taken from her victim. It wasn't just murder, it was premeditated. And the evidence proved she had fantasized about it long before she ever carried it out. The trial. In court, the defense tried to argue that she was too young to understand the consequences. But prosecutors revealed her meticulous planning. They showed the jury her writings, her online searches, and her cold demeanor when she spoke about the crime. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't immaturity. It was intent. And when the verdict was read, the courtroom fell silent. Why this case terrifies us. If Chapter 2's story shocked us because it felt like a sudden breakdown, this case terrifies us because it shows calculation. The babysitter wasn't overwhelmed in the moment. She wanted this. She waited for it. She planned for it. And if someone so young could carefully orchestrate such horror, it leaves us with one haunting question. How many other babysitters might be hiding the same dark desires? When a babysitter kills, the courtroom doesn't just put the crime on trial, it puts childhood itself on trial. Should a 13 or 15-year-old who commits murder be treated like an innocent child who lost control, or like a cold-blooded adult criminal? This is the question that haunts prosecutors, defense attorneys, judges, and juries in every one of these cases. And the answers are far from simple. The legal maze. In many countries, the law allows minors to be tried as adults in extreme cases, especially when the crime is violent and premeditated. Prosecutors often argue that when a teenager plans a murder, they forfeit the protections of childhood. But defense lawyers push back. They point to science. The teenage brain isn't fully developed. Impulse control, risk assessment, and empathy are still forming. Can someone whose brain is still under construction really grasp the permanence of taking a life? This legal tug-of-war plays out in case after case, with outcomes that vary wildly depending on the state, the judge, and the jury. Psychology of young offenders. Experts who study young killers point out patterns. Many have histories of trauma, neglect, or abuse. Some display early warning signs of conduct disorders. A few show chilling traits of psychopathy at an age when most kids are worried about homework. The problem is, no single explanation fits all. For some, babysitting gave them authority they never had before, and they abused it. For others, it was an outlet for rage they couldn't express anywhere else. And for a few, it was the first step in what looked like the beginning of a serial pattern. Courtroom battles. Some trials turned into national debates. When jurors looked at the young babysitter sitting at the defense table, sometimes wearing braces, sometimes still in school uniforms, it was hard to reconcile the image with the brutality of the crime. Was this a child who made a terrible mistake? Or a predator in the making? Families of victims often demand the harshest punishment, arguing that age doesn't lessen the pain of loss. But child advocates argue that sentencing teens to life without parole, or even the death penalty in past decades, ignores the possibility of rehabilitation. The public divide. Media coverage of these cases fuels the divide. Headlines often paint babysitter killers as monsters or demons, while others highlight their youth, portraying them as children lost too soon. Communities are left to grapple with the bigger question. If someone so young can commit such a crime, what does it say about society's ability to protect both children and families? What justice really means? The deeper question is this: what is justice when the criminal is also a child? Is it about punishment, or is it about protection? Can we truly rehabilitate a babysitter who kills, or are we just hoping they'll never do it again? For every case that ends in harsh sentencing, there's another where a teen offender is released after serving just a few years. And each time, communities live in fear. Will they kill again? Babysitting was once seen as a rite of passage, a simple job that gave teenagers responsibility and parents peace of mind. But the cases we've uncovered changed that image forever. They revealed that sometimes, the person entrusted to protect children can be the very one who destroys them. Families shattered. For the families who lived through these tragedies, life was never the same. A night out, a simple errand, or a routine babysitting arrangement ended in heartbreak. The homes where laughter once filled the air became permanent reminders of trust betrayed. The parents not only lost their children, they lost their sense of safety. And in some cases, they were left with the unbearable guilt of knowing the killer was someone they themselves had welcomed into their home. Communities in shock. When these crimes hit the news, entire communities were shaken. Neighbors who once felt safe leaving their kids with the local teen now second-guessed every decision. Rumors spread, trust fractured, and parents everywhere asked themselves the same chilling question: how well do we really know the people watching our children? The offender's fate. Some of these babysitter killers remain behind bars, serving long sentences for their crimes. Others, however, have already been released, walking free into adulthood with new names, new identities, and a chance at a life their victims never got. For many, that's the hardest truth to accept. Justice, no matter how harsh, never balances the scale when a child is lost. And yet, society continues to wrestle with the same question. Do young killers deserve rehabilitation, or do their crimes demand permanent punishment? The lasting questions. What makes a teenager snap? Why would a trusted babysitter betray the most sacred duty, protecting a child? Are these cases rare, or are they simply the few we know about? Psychologists, criminologists, and legal experts all offer theories, but the truth is chillingly simple. Evil doesn't always wait for adulthood. Sometimes it emerges early, hidden behind a babysitter's smile. Closing reflection. As parents, we all want to believe that the people we trust with our children will keep them safe. But the stories we've explored prove that sometimes the greatest danger doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people already inside our homes. Backhand index pointing right, final hook for retention and subscribes. This is not just a story about crime. It's a story about trust, betrayal, and the darkest corners of human nature. And while these cases may leave us unsettled, they also remind us why true crime matters. Because by understanding what went wrong, maybe we can prevent it from happening again. If you want more chilling true crime stories that reveal the hidden dangers lurking where we least expect them, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because the next story might just be even more disturbing.